Do you know of a place where I can stay? Snow White asked her woodland friends. In response, two little birds chirped excitedly and began to tug gently at her cape. Snow White followed her new friends to a tiny cottage nestled among the trees. "It's just like a doll's house," Snow White exclaimed. Since no one seemed to be home, Snow White stepped inside. "Oh my, what a terrible mess!" she cried. She stared in wonder at the 7 little chairs. "7 children must live here," she said. "I'll just tidy up a bit and surprise them. Perhaps they'll let me stay for a while." Snow White began to clean the cottage. The animals helped her sweep and dust and wash and scrub. Soon the cottage was neat and tidy. Snow White went upstairs where she found 7 little beds lined up in a row. Each one had a name carved on it. "What funny names for children," remarked Snow White as she read the names aloud. "Happy, Dopey, Grumpy, Sneezy, Bashful, Duck, and Sleepy." Then she yawned. "I'm a little sleepy myself," she added. Snow White lay across the tiny beds and promptly fell asleep. Meanwhile, 7 little men were hurrying home from a hard day's work in the diamond mine. They didn't know it, but they had a surprise waiting for them. For these were the 7 dwarfs who lived in the cottage where Snow White lay sleeping. They sang merrily as they walked through the forest. Duck led the way, this is Duck, with the lantern. Behind him were Grumpy, Happy, so this is Grumpy, this is Happy, this is Sleepy, this is Sneezy, this is Bashful, and last of all, Dopey. As they neared the house, the dwarfs noticed that something was different. These windows were clean. Cautiously, they crept inside. Everything was neat and tidy. "Just as I thought," cried Duck. "Someone's been here." Maybe it's a goblin," said Bashful. "And maybe it's still here." "Only one way to find out," said Grumpy. So up the stairs they went, but instead of a goblin, the dwarfs found Snow White fast asleep on their beds. "It's a girl," declared Duck. "She's beautiful," added Happy. Snow White was awakened by the voices. "Oh," she cried when she saw them. "Why, you're not children at all. You're little men." "That's right," said Duck. "But who are you?" Snow White introduced herself and told them all about the Wicked Queen. "You can stay with us," said Duck. "We won't let anything happen to you." All the other dwarfs agreed. Back at the castle, the queen once again consulted her magic mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" she asked. She was sure she knew the answer, but the mirror replied, "Over the 7 jeweled hills, beyond the 7th fall, in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs, dwells Snow White, fairest one of all." The queen was outraged. The huntsman lied. She shouted, knocking the jeweled box to the ground. "Now I will have to take care of her myself." The queen ran down the stairs to a dark dungeon where she kept an assortment of enchanted powders and bubbling liquids. She quickly mixed herself a magic potion. When she drank the potion, she instantly turned into an ugly old woman. Then she cast a magic spell over a luscious red apple. "One bite of this poison apple and Snow White will sleep forever," she cackled with glee. That night at the cottage, Snow White cooked a special meal for the dwarfs. "Supper's almost ready," she told them. "You just have to wash." "Wash?" chorused the dwarfs. They had almost forgotten what the word meant. But Snow White was firm, so they all went outside to scrub themselves clean. Even Grumpy got a soaking. After dinner, it was time for some fun. The dwarfs played their musical instruments and turned dancing with Snow White. Dopey climbed on Sneezy's shoulders and covered them both with a long coat. Now he was as tall as Snow White. But not for long. One sneeze from Sneezy sent them both tumbling on the floor. Before they set for work the next morning, Snow White gave each dwarf a kiss on the head. "Beware of strangers," warned Duck. "No telling what that wicked queen might do." "Don't worry," replied Snow White, "I'll be careful." After the dwarfs left, Snow White began making pies. "All alone, my pet?" she heard someone ask. Snow White turned and saw an old woman at the window. "How would you like to taste one of my nice apples? They are wishing apples, you know," the old woman asked. "They do look good," replied Snow White. The animals recognized the queen at once, but Snow White didn't. Snow White took the apple and made a wish. As soon as she bit into the apple, she fell to the floor. Only love's first kiss could wake the sleeping princess. "Ha ha ha," cackled the queen. "Now, my pretty princess, you will sleep forever." The animals hurried to the mine. They tugged at the dwarf's clothes until the little men understood that something was terribly wrong. The dwarfs jumped onto the dare and headed for the cottage. On their way, they spotted the old woman and recognized the queen in her disguise. "Follow her," Grumpy shouted. So they chased her all the way up to a steep cliff. This is the queen, evil queen. The queen reached the top of the cliff and was trapped on a narrow ledge. She was about to push a huge boulder into the dwarfs when a bolt of lightning, can you see the lightning? A bolt of lightning struck off the ledge. With a horrible scream, she fell to the jagged rocks below. The wicked queen, was gone. When the dwarfs finally arrived home, they found Snow White asleep on the floor. Nothing they did could wake her from sleep. With tears in their eyes, they gently laid Snow White on the bed. The next day, the dwarfs built a golden casket for Snow White. It was covered with glass so that they could always see her. Then, they carried the casket to a peaceful glen in the depths of the forest, where the tall pine carpeted the ground with their fragrant needles. For many days, the dwarfs stayed by Snow White's side, hoping she would wake up, but Snow White slept on and on. Meanwhile, the lonely prince had been searching for Snow White far and wide. One day, he heard of a beautiful maiden who slept in a golden casket deep in the forest surrounded by 7 little men. Finally, he came upon Snow White. He lifted the heavy glass lid. "My beautiful Snow White, at last I have found you," he whispered. Then he kissed the sleeping princess. Snow White opened her eyes. The spell was broken. The prince gathered Snow White in his arms and lifted her onto his horse. This time, Snow White was not afraid of her handsome prince. "Goodbye," she called to all the dwarfs. "You have been good, kind friends. I will never forget you." Snow White kept her promise. She included the dwarfs in all the festivities at the castle, where she and her prince lived happily ever after. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and like. Bye.